Welcome to Scandinavian Mind Weekly, our show about the current trends and events within business, tech, fashion, culture, design, and more, from the Nordic perspective of our team of editors and contributors. Today on the program, we take a look at how the fashion and tech communities are responding to the war in Ukraine, both on a local as well as a global level. From fashion sample sales and NFT projects to H&M and IKEA suspending their businesses in Russia. Also, we are launching a new podcast. We give a sneak peek of our new format, KONST, later in the program. I'm Konrad Olsson, editor-in-chief and founder of Scandinavian Mind, and I'm here with my dear colleagues Roland, Philippe, Kretzschmar, editor-at-large, and Erik, Sedin, junior editor. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you feeling, Erik?
I'm good. I'm perfect. Getting there. I just can't stop
Erik.
myself from being sick, apparently. No immune system left.
Well, it has certainly been a week. I've been up in the mountains with my family, and pretty much every day we've been monitoring the situation in Ukraine, talking about the developments of the war, we're covering sort of fashion and design and potentially kind of superficial subjects. But after a while, everything is related to what's happening in the world. And what we did Wednesday, just a couple of days ago, we took a look at some of the initiatives and reactions that the sort of fashion and tech communities had on the war. And I feel like this was just scratching the surface. 2 days later, there's been so much more activity. So I thought we'd take a look at that and kind of the dynamics behind it, who's doing what and who's not doing enough. So for me, just on a local level, we saw sort of the first reactions coming out from obviously from the Instagram feed and Twitter feed. I think a few interesting things that happened was that the Danish fashion community went out with one initiative super fast. We've seen examples in Stockholm where they initiated fashion sample sales. Maybe it sounds like a superficial thing, but where all the proceeds will go to Ukraine and the victims there. Pretty much all the major organizations have come out against Russia's invasion and encouraged their followers, their communities to act. And so I think the question quickly became why things didn't happen on a global level. And I thought we should talk about this dynamic a little bit. Roland, from your perspective, you've covered this as well, I'm sure. What have you seen or not seen?
I mean, I just want to comment on your observation related to kind of geographical activities or geolocated activities. So I guess, and again, I'm not a political expert here, so a disclaimer, but I guess that in the Nordics, we have a history of being very kind of sensitive to all the actions taking place in Russia, generally speaking. I mean, it goes hundreds of years back. So maybe that is kind of the simple answer, that we reacted very fast in the Nordics because of the history that we have, the complicated relationship to Russia. But then maybe also because we have generally a very humanitarian view on the world, and we just have we have taken a position in the world to be at the forefront of humanity, to try to support countries who are in war or where there are conflicts, and it seems to me that it's ingrained into our culture. That does not mean that you wouldn't have the same kind of behaviors in Southern Europe or elsewhere in the world, but I think in the Nordic region it is definitely a very big part of society and how we function also as individuals.
Yeah, for sure. And I think especially in the Nordics, especially Sweden and Finland have a special relationship because we're not in NATO, and Finland is obviously a neighboring country. Just some of the things that happened there was a an initiative called Copenhagen for Ukraine, a group of friends and brands from Copenhagen that went together and initiated a mobile pay solution for sending money to the Danish Red Cross. In Sweden, in Stockholm, we have the PR agency Ibeo Studios that quickly arranged this sort of fashion sample sale where they pulled together brands and asked them to give garments and create the sample sale. I think this is happening this weekend. Also on this sort of NFT front, we have Patrik Arnesson, the founder of Forza Football, famous sort of NFT profile in Sweden. He quickly put together a charity with a special piece by Philippe Posada, so will be minted in 43 million editions, which I'm guessing is like, that's not even a cap. That's just making sure everyone can have the ability to buy this with 100% of the proceeds.
Population of Ukraine, by the way, 43
I'm sorry?
million. Isn't that the population number of Ukraine, 43 million? I
Oh,
don't know.
that's what it is.
It is. It's one
course.
for every Ukrainian
Yeah,
citizen.
of course.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So 100% of these proceeds would go to local charities. Obviously, I think Patrik also has a special relationship to Ukraine. He has lived there and has, or at least had, employees there before the war started. So the question then becomes, because what really sparked my attention to this issue is, one of the first things that came out is a photographer called Maciek Kobielski. He's of Polish descent. He lives in New York. He's worked a lot with Wall Street Journal magazine and many other big fashion magazines. I've actually worked with him once when I was editor-in-chief of Plaza. He came out with a very strong post on Instagram called, it just said, "War in Ukraine, luxury brands and publications, what do you stand for?" Really sort of urging the international fashion community to take a stand. And this was 5 days ago. This was Monday. So at that point, nothing much had happened. I think the first couple of international fashion brands that did something was, first of all, Armani, who decided to, still host his show at Milan Fashion Week. So Milan Fashion Week was running at the same time, which if you follow my Instagram feed, made it quite a weird feed, weird curated feed, because I both had updates on Ukraine and updates from Milan Fashion Week, kind of street style. But anyways, Giorgio Armani himself decided to host the show completely without music. I'm sure that was kind of a last minute decision, whatever he could do, and he said it was a very personal decision. I think shortly thereafter, Balenciaga came out and just emptied its Instagram feed, and with just a photograph of the Ukraine flag. So that was too major. And I think then the question kind of became, what of the rest of the guys? What of LVMH? What of Kering Group? How will they respond? And I have some thoughts on that, but I just wanted you guys' reaction to those initial sort of response from these brands. Roland?
I mean, I just have a kind of as you say, an initial comment. So this is obviously a sensitive topic generally. Sometimes when there are these kind of world-reaching conflicts or crises, and we have brands engaging, or celebrities or influencers, it's usually quite superficial. So when I saw the silent catwalk show of Giorgio Armani, I was like, bloody hell, what is this? This is ridiculous. This is just superficial attempt to make to scream into nothingness. I thought basically it was ridiculous. But what has happened since, and this is when it becomes interesting, is that all the major fashion houses have now started to dedicated real resources. I mean, they are investing money into different organizations and NGOs, and they are donating proceeds from auctions sales. They are engaging with real assets, money, time, resources, not just doing these kind of symbolic shout outs, which could be perceived as superficial and not making any major effect. So I think that has been for me the biggest surprise, how fast it went from zero comments to superficial attempts to comment to actually do something very tangible, donating millions and millions and millions of dollars and euros into this cause.
But it was interesting what you said there about these superficial statements that don't really do anything. I don't know if you guys saw the LVMH statement they posted on their Instagram.
Yeah.
Which was, first of all, I think it's good because I think they're gonna donate 5 million euros to the Red Cross, ICRC. So it's the International Committee of the Red Cross. So it's not like the Red Cross in Ukraine, but 5 million euros, like it's a lot of money. It's not just like.
But that's what I mean, Erik. But that came later during the week, right? So in the beginning, there were more kind of these superficial commentaries, like having a silent fashion show. Who bloody cares in Ukraine about the silent fashion show?
Yeah, I agree.
It's ridiculous, to be honest.
Exactly.
But donating 5 million euros to that can make a change, or changing production units in factories, or supporting with manpower. So that was basically my comment.
Just to go on that LVMH statement, I think they were kind of like, they probably have a lot of Russian consumers, a lot of rich people wanting to buy LVMH products of all sorts. And I think if you read this statement, it's kind of like they're not really taking a stand against Russia. They're just like talking about a conflict. They're talking about their employees in this conflicted area, which I think it's nice enough that they're like giving all this money. That's very clear and that's really good. But I've also noticed how some of these guys are not really saying we're against Russia. We're against this invasion. They're just saying, oh, we're really sorry to hear about this conflict, and we want to monitor the situation.
You're right.
I think it's different wordings can mean so much, at least to me.
But you're right, and given all the sanctions now, I mean, one way to kind of invest and secure assets is to buy luxury goods and products, and I mean we've seen that with cryptocurrency that has soared in the past week. And obviously also luxury spend coming from Russia apparently is also soaring because of securing assets. So you're right, and this is why it's a sensitive topic, right?
Definitely.
So yes, on the other hand, LVMH are doing a good thing. On the other hand, they are not taking they don't have an opinion in the cause. And this is, I would say, the difference from what we see in the Nordics, that the Nordic companies, at least, and I'm not monitoring every single local newspaper, so I don't know if it happens in other countries as well. But at least in the Nordics, in Sweden, Swedish companies, they are publicly now going against Russia, the invasion, the illegal invasion. They're stopping production, taking away. So I think that is the big shift, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious. I would say it's a stark contrast between the LVMH group's their post on Instagram, where they're not talking about war, they're talking about a tragic situation in Ukraine.
Exactly, even that.
And they're standing alongside those severely affected. So they're kind of making general
Russians.
Claims about people in this situation, as they call it. Whereas H&M Group and IKEA have made much stronger stances. IKEA has canceled all production, all import and export in and out of Russia, affecting 15,000 employees from what I understand. And just I don't know how long they will continue with that, but just the optics of it is just so much stronger from those guys than the luxury community. And I haven't seen anything from sort of if you go into the sort of watch and jewelry and that sort of arena of luxury. I haven't seen anything, and I think there's a great I don't know if that's the right word, but there's a strong tradition within luxury watches and luxury consumer goods to be very neutral in these situations. And I think the comments I read was that they kind of lean on that tradition and say that we are traditionally not taking a stance, we are operating across the world and so forth. So, but I think in a situation like this, that type of non-action speaks, volumes. And I would actually say that I'm gonna give Giorgio Armani credit for doing that show in silent, because no one else was doing anything at Milan Fashion Week at that point. So just doing something in this delicate situation, in this industry that's doing so little, speaks volumes. But then, of course, you have to follow it up with real action and real sanctions, and or sending real money, or like really trying to affect the situation.
Yeah, so I agree with you, obviously, that it's better to do something. But again, I doubt that the population of Ukraine thinks that having a silent fashion show in Milan is going to change anything. That was my point.
No, of course,
Then
but
when it
I
comes
do
to,
think it changes the trajectory of the conversation in the fashion industry. That a few days later led to LVMH having to do something.
yeah.
So part of this is communication, part of it is true action.
Yeah, and then I need to comment H&M. I mean, yes, now they are going out and taking a stand, but they were actually planning to open a few new stores in Russia this week, and they were forced, I would say, as a reaction to media attention and media coverage, to postpone those openings. I mean, they were literally about to open a new Arcade store in Moscow this week.
Yeah.
They were planning to continue to open it even after the invasion.
Yeah.
And then when media kind of started to cover that, obviously they had to pause the opening, etc. So, in all honesty, it feels a bit superficial, hypocritical. If they would follow the business rationale, they would open the store regardless of the invasion. So, now that does not say that changing one's opinion in a very complex geopolitical situation is wrong. Of course, that's fantastic. If they genuinely think that they have to change their position, but I doubt it. I think we will see a normalization. That's my bet here. For the next 3 to 6 months, there is very little. Very few signs, unfortunately, that Russia will stop the invasion. They will most probably succeed in invading Ukraine, and that will then lead to a normalization. So my guess is that, let's say 3, 6, 9 months from now, H&M will open up their stores in Moscow, and all the luxury companies will continue to sell to Russians. Nothing will have changed.
No, I mean the scope of the sort of cutoff of Russia from the rest of the world. I think that's where the each and everyone's contribution makes a difference. We'll see what happens. Obviously, I think things like cutting off SWIFT, cutting off airspace, that type of stuff makes obviously a bigger change in terms of cutting off Russia from the rest of the world. But as you say, I mean, Russia is one of the biggest markets in the world. It's got a population of 150 million or so, and I guess eventually the situation will become: are we not going to serve those people with consumer goods and so forth? Which I think leads us to
very low. I mean,
I'm sorry?
Konrad is a big country by numbers of people and size, but the BNP is the size of South Korea. So, on a global scale, it's not such a big economy, actually. And this is why it's also quite interesting that we have kind of a biased view from the West when we look at this. And I would say also, looking at it from, again, I'm no expert here. This is my personal opinions. But to my own analysis, looking at it from Putin's perspective, I don't think he cares at all about the sanctions. Zero about the sanctions. He has calculated the risks. He knows what's going to happen. For him personally, for his kind of oligarchs and his closest supporters, zero change in direction. I don't think the sanctions will stop anything, to be honest. It's only going to make the Russian population suffer.
Let's take a look at this from another angle, and from the angle of tech, which have the similar implications in doing that. There's been a lot of chatter around should Facebook cut down their operations? Should we cut off the Russian people from these services? We have seen some action from the big tech giants. I think I know Apple and Google have sort of limited their maps capabilities. I think Facebook cut off the many of the Russian state owned media entities. Also cut off the ability for Russian operations to advertise on the platform. What else have you seen from the tech space, and do you think it's enough?
I think, like you said, Roland, I'm usually, I am a bit worried about the Russian population first, because if all these tech companies like Facebook, Snapchat, like the big ones, Google, if they just pull the plug on all the servers in Russia, the people won't really know what's going on, because of course they're going to be led astray by Russia Today and Sputnik, like the state media-owned news channels. So it's important that these guys still exist there, but they're still doing some sanctions. Like you said, both Facebook, Snapchat, and Twitter are removing ad sales for both the Russian and, what I thought was interesting, Belarusian entities.
Yeah.
So they can't, make money out of ad sales on there. And also Spotify, if we're going a bit back to Scandinavia, Spotify has closed down all of their Russian offices, and all of their employees have been cut off.
Also, after some media pressure, Erik, again, they
I know.
want to do that, the same as H&M. So they are forced by media to do it.
Exactly, it's a bit hypocritical from our like you said, us Scandinavians, we like to big ourselves up, and we're humanitarian, but perhaps it was all pressure from other countries that made us do it. But Spotify has also yanked, Russia Today, they have a podcast. Sputnik News also has podcasts. They've taken those away from Spotify too, but Spotify is still available in Russia. Also, if you look at Apple has paused, like I said, paused in quotation marks, all sales in Russia. So all the stores are closing and nothing is coming in or out for now. So, but like you said before, Roland, it's only paused. So how many months will it take before it's normalized and before things are going back to normal? But for now, this is obviously, I think, the youth of Russia will probably wonder, why can't we get the latest tech? Why can't we get the new iPhone or the new MacBook if new ones are being released? This is the things that I think affects the population the most, when they realize, whoa, we're falling behind the Western world in tech and innovation and stuff.
One observation I've made in the area of tech is how few reports I've seen, at least, on having hacker groups doing attacks on Russian entities.
Yeah,
that's something also about the I would say the power and the knowledge there is in the Russian security forces or surveillance forces. I don't know what you call it, right? But I mean, they definitely have a leading position globally in when we talk about cyber war.
Mm-hmm.
And the very few accounts I've seen about hacker groups trying to impact Russia, I mean, it's all failed because the Russians are basically better.
Yeah, there's been a few stories on Wall Street Journal had a big story, and also I think New York Times about both Anonymous and some other hacker groups.
Yeah.
Closing down the Moscow Stock Exchange, bank websites, sort of trying to create confusion. I have not read anything about Russia's own sort of cyber warfare actions regarding this conflict, but there has been some chatter
around. They closed
around
down all Ukraine's media outlets, all the banks. I mean, the week prior to the invasion. So for weeks and months prior to the invasion, Russia did numerous attacks on Ukraine infrastructure to kind of prepare for the invasion. So, but I think also the let's say. The reports on Anonymous, etc. So, they closed down the exchange for a couple of minutes. I mean, it's very, very little impact. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just, giving some sort of flavor to this, that I think we have to change the narrative here in the West. Russia is going to succeed in invading Ukraine, and what implications will that have? I think we live in a lie at the moment, where we tell ourselves that, some sort of magic is going to happen, that suddenly Putin is going to stop and say, oh, now, okay, sorry, I'm pulling back my forces.
Right.
That's not going to happen. I'm sorry. I mean, we just have to be realistic and pragmatic in discussing this.
Yeah, I think what's left to be seen is what I was talking about before. Like, how long will we be able to cut off Russia from the rest of the world? Will they essentially be a new kind of North Korea in that sense? I mean, there was a story out in Swedish Dagens Nyheter the other day about how, it's 80 years of relationships between Finland and Russia that have now completely stopped. And that's, of course, sort of frightening for us in the Nordics here, that the diplomatic channels are completely silent. So how will this affect the rest of the world's relationship to Russia, and how Putin seems obviously strong, military strong. I'm sure he has financially, he's financially sound, at least for himself and for his closest advisors. So what will the situation be? Will there be kind of like a new Cold War? And I think then, if we're looking at that situation, I think tech will play a much bigger role than the previous Cold War, because the ability to send information, the ability to send value will play a huge role in this. And there's already talks about how important cryptocurrencies have become in this situation, because on the one hand you have these extremely wealthy oligarchs who is now seeing their rubles plummet in value. Obviously, they're going for both sort of luxury goods and real estate, and I think also blockchain cryptocurrencies to sort of save their wealth. But we're also seeing a rise in cryptocurrencies in Ukraine, where activist groups and people cut off from the traditional financial system are using cryptocurrencies to operate. So I think we're going to see a completely new landscape. I don't think this conflict will be over anytime soon. We're obviously smack in the middle of the beginning of it, but there is something interesting that's going to play out on a tech arena here.
Definitely, no, I definitely agree with you. And I mean, there are accounts that this has been repeated now for the past 5 to 10 years, that Bitcoin is the new gold, etc. And I think maybe in these kind of crises you see the value of cryptocurrency as being a relatively stable alternative to fiat currency. But on the other hand, I mean, I follow crypto valuations on a daily basis. It's extremely volatile. I mean, just now in the past 24 hours, when the Russians seized this nuclear plant in Ukraine, Bitcoin dropped, ETH dropped, all the other cryptocurrencies dropped after a massive increase earlier this week. So, it's still extremely volatile. But you're right. I think this is going to cement cryptocurrency moving forward, definitely. But it will probably also increase the speed of regulating crypto, because as obviously this is an opportunity for sanctioned oligarchs to place their money and assets in another way. Obviously, then big nations such as the US, UK, and others are going to try to restrict that moving forward. So I see probably faster regulations of crypto as a consequence of this. And then I would probably compare the future state of Russia to Iran and its position on the global arena, maybe more than North Korea. North Korea is an anomaly, and it's kind of a storybook example. But Iran, I think, is a more relevant comparison. They operate on the global arena. They have a clear position. They have survived 40 years of dictatorship. Suppression, and they operate quite freely, I would say, regardless of the sanctions. So I would forecast that Russia will either have to turn back towards Europe, and we might get positively surprised, or I think they will end up like Iran. Again,
But
without being an
Roland, I
expert.
wanted to ask you just to end on this topic. What have you seen in the art world, which you are covering, avidly? What has the reaction been there?
I mean, among artists, obviously a lot of engagement, but also hesitance. I have not seen any of the major artists taking a stand in this, which is quite surprising. Where you would say from the fashion community, you actually see individual designers taking a stand, even if the fashion houses are not. Then when it comes to galleries, I mean, honestly speaking, I'm personally extremely disappointed. Very little or no action at all. It's business as usual, Um, among the blue chip galleries, and by that, we mean the big global players, Goshen, Pace, Hauser and Wirth, etc. It's only Pace Gallery that has taken publicly a position, donating money to UNICEF. But no other blue chip galleries or even local galleries in Sweden have taken any position. I'm extremely surprised. Traditionally, the art world is where we might see political commentary. There's some sort of radicalism in the art world, right? It's part of the kind of the DNA of the art world, right? But in my honest opinion, I think the fashion world is much more progressive at the moment than the art world.
Well, and that's kind of saying something, isn't it?
It's I don't even know. It's too early for me to understand why this is. I mean, obviously, there is follow the money, right? So obviously, a lot of the big buyers are coming from Russia,
Yeah.
and also from other parts of the world where you might have conflicts. I mean, China, big spend on art. Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, big spend on art. They are all, let's say, friends or unofficial friends to Russia. That is part of the narrative here, right? So I think we have to look also beyond Russia when we talk about these sanctions or the inactions from luxury and art, that we also have all the other kind of friends of Russia that are spending huge amounts of money, maybe even more. So yeah, but I'm personally disappointed. Let's see if we see some changes in the next couple of weeks. I doubt it, to be honest. One major, let's say, discussion or conflict has been around Philippe, the auction house, because it is majority owned by a Russian oligarch whose name I have now forgotten, but they have had a lot of challenges online in social media related to this. They actually did something great. I think it was yesterday. They had a big auction, and they have now donated all their auction premiums, which I think was 5.8 million pounds sterling, to humanitarian causes related to the Ukrainian invasion. So that I think is quite courageous, to be honest, because they are actually still majority owned by a Russian oligarch that is, close friend to Putin. So let's see where we evolve with that.
Yeah, well, this is obviously going to be a situation that we will keep monitoring from the sort of lens of the Nordics and the topics that we cover. I just want to end with one snapshot I saw on Johan Kjellman Larsson, a famous literary writer here in Stockholm. He posted a photo or reposted a photo from the Russian bookstore in Stockholm, which had hung the Ukrainian flag on its entrance. So maybe there's a little bit of a hope there that this is not about the entire Russian population. It's about power and leadership, as always. All right, we're going to end with some news on the Scandinavian Mind podcast landscape. We're actually going to widen our offering in the next few weeks. Going to launch 2 new shows, starting with next week with a new show completely hosted by Roland. It's called KONST. It's going to be about the art world. Roland, what are we going to expect from this new show of ours?
Well, first, I need to thank you, Konrad, for this opportunity. I think Scandinavian Mind is the perfect platform for KONST, and for non-Swedish or non-Scandinavian listeners, KONST literally means art in Swedish. I think there is room for an art podcast, not only in Scandinavian, but actually globally, which is looking more into the future of art. Not looking backwards so much, trying to take the temperature on contemporary art, what's buzzing right now at the moment, what are the interconnections between the artists, galleries, the financial arena, politics, as we discussed previously on the show today. Having a broader perspective, but also exploring really the future of art. So I'm very excited about this. We will have both co-hosts and guests in every episode. And in the very first episode, which will be launched next week, so basically early March, it's going to feature Michael Elmenbeck, who is a Swedish gallerist, art dealer, and collector. And we also have a fantastic guest, Destiny Ross Sutton, who is an African-American curator, gallerist, and art promoter. And it's seriously, the conversation is super interesting. It touches on some of the challenges coming out of the BLM movement and African-American art, the challenges in the African-American art scene. But actually, when you listen to the episode, there is a lot that you can relate back to being a human being, how to manage conflicts, difficult situations. And I think, with everything related to the Ukraine invasion, it's worth listening to. So yeah, super excited.
Wonderful. So we're really happy and proud to have this new show on, and thank you, Roland, for creating it for us. All right, this has been a long and packed episode of the Scandinavian Mind Weekly. We'll be back next week with more observation. Please sign up to our newsletter. Visit scandinavianmind.com/newsletter to stay updated. Until next week, have a nice weekend, guys.
Stay safe, guys.
See ya.